This had better be important.
Yes, sir. The American agent has infiltrated the X-Lab facility.
Welcome back to the Funker 530 Combat Footage Recap. My name is Ronnie. I'll be your host once again. Do me a favor, drop a like button, please and thank you, and a comment into the chat to let me know where you guys are, where you're chiming in from. It's always good to hear from you. Thank you for being here. We're here on Thursday again. I get it. I know. I am too stupid to be able to track my schedule. Anyway, we'll get there eventually because I'm a professional and I've only been doing this for a couple weeks, years. We've got a lot of work to get through tonight, a lot of footage that I want to cover. But again, first, I want to start tonight off by saying thank you to you guys. I know I don't get an opportunity to do it enough, but I should, because as long as this show has been going on, we're over 3 years now, right? I told you about the design of this show long before any of the current wars and that the stuff that we talk about, long before any of that had occurred. This show had a design. We were always going to do this, but we were kind of thrust into the F it, we'll do it live mode when Russia decided to invade Ukraine. Well, 3 years later, and we're still going, right? At one point, we spun it down so I could get this whole new studio stood up. Now we have the ability to bring in guests, and hopefully once my schedule kind of opens back up, most of you know I took on another job, we'll be able to resume that as well. But throughout all of that, you've continued to come back, continued to find your way into just about anywhere that I have work going on, whether it's somebody else's podcast chat and all the BS happy birthdays taking over the chat there, or wherever it is. You guys continue to support the Funker 530 community. You understand what it is that we're here to do, and what it is that we're not here to do. So the same it's not a CYA, the same disclaimer from last week's show applies to this week's show. We're going to be talking about the collapse of the Kursk salient. By definition, that is what I would describe it as. I also provided some thoughts about that. I've got plenty of footage for us to look at from multiple perspectives on that, and we'll be getting to that right out of the gate tonight. But this show is primarily and will always be focused on the footage. So let's get started with the footage that I have for you from Kursk. We're going to go through the Kursk section. Then I'm going to take us on a little bit of an around the world. I wanted to start there tonight, though. Around the world segment, though, we'll be going to Syria. We won't be watching what you think we're going to be watching. I'm not in the habit of showing innocent civilians being murdered on the streets, Jelani. But we will see some combat footage from Syria. We're going to see some stuff from Yemen. We'll stop in Sudan as well, and then we'll be right back to Ukraine footage. The first thing that I want to talk about tonight, the first bit of footage, is pipes. Russia, long before, I shouldn't say long before, but before the rest of the collapse of the Kursk salient, the operational area that Ukraine had taken, I'm going to talk about this little section here in a little bit, because this is indicative of something for me. But before the collapse, Russian saboteurs, infantrymen, troops, had made their way 16 kilometers in a gas pipeline all the way to this location. Now, there were reported to be up to and including 100 troops involved in this. Ukraine claims that about 100 of them came out of the pipe. Here is a little bit of footage of those troops while they were in this pipe. Again, this was about 16 kilometers worth of a trip with gear, water, food, weapons, equipment, everything you could imagine.
Патриот, улыбайся.
Все нормально, ветер салфетку где?
На связи, брат, на связи.
ему что-то так поддали, блядь. А у него денег было. Этот речной трамвайчик, он туда спустился.
Now, these are reportedly,
Вдвоем, чтобы...
these guys are waiting for the order to essentially go. That's my understanding of this video. Don't know exactly where along that 16 kilometers worth of pipeline these guys are chilling right now. But that's exactly what they're doing, is they're just waiting. Not going to go there. That's an interesting choice, though.
Патриот, улыбайся.
This is a gas pipeline. I understand that it's probably safe. Still kind of an interesting choice. Let's go on to a little bit more. I've got another bit of footage here showing them moving some of that equipment through that pipeline. Coming up now.
Если хочет остаться, останься просто так.
Мне кажется, что мы в гору идем.
Да, чуть в гору.
I think I've got another one for you here from this second third-party source. Coming up for you. Nope. No, I sure don't. But I do have an additional bit of video. I'm going to take you back to the map. I have this location marked here. Well, this is the exit point. This is where Russians popped out of that pipe and presumably were there to assault into Sudzha. The battle for Sudzha has been one that's very prominent over the last few days on social media. Well, when at least some of them popped out of that pipe, important to note that we don't know where exactly this takes place in the timeline of this entire operation. It could be at the very beginning, could be at the very end. I don't know if people came out of this pipe beforehand. I don't know what I don't know, because video, say it with me, is an imperfect lens into reality. But once they did, or at least some of them, well, they were immediately targeted by drones, artillery, including cluster, and they didn't have a good day. Here's this footage. It's not my mouse, just so you know. All of this geolocated to that. That's cluster. HIMARS, M30. All of this geolocated to that same small little area I had you guys zoomed in on the map. We're going to talk about this here in a second. So let's talk about this, right? So there's been nothing of was it successful or was it not successful? Well, it seems to have been they took a high amount of casualties on this. But what was the end state? The end state was that the Kursk salient collapsed, frankly. So as just one small lens into what was a larger counteroffensive in Kursk, this battle alone, you could probably classify as some level of a loss. But the counteroffensive to take Kursk back has been wildly successful. In fact, I would classify it nearly as a rout, subject to your definition of that. The concern that we're going to talk about here in a little bit is whether or not that rout gets, or withdrawal, we'll just stick with withdrawal, gets exploited. The most dangerous part of any withdrawal is the potential for exploitation, i.e., not necessarily directly, but being quote-unquote shot in the back, or Russia pressing further into Ukraine because of the withdrawal from Kursk. That is a concern that I think people should have, at least generally speaking. And I think there's a little bit of evidence to support that. There's all kinds of other sub-narratives and stories that go along with this operation as well. Some of these Russians were in there dressed as though they were Ukrainian with blue tape around the armbands. On the one hand, you'll have folks that when Ukrainians do that, they say that's a war crime. And then on the other hand, when Russia does it, it's like, well, you know, they were saboteurs. You know, it's all a part of the war. It's either all a part of war or it isn't, frankly. There's also some information to indicate that a lot of these dudes suffocated in there. And that's coming from Russian sources specifically. And I'm almost able to quote it. What about those that suffocated? So this pipe operation, if you look at it objectively as a single event, as a single operation, yeah, probably unsuccessful. I would probably classify it as that. When you look at it across a larger scale of what ultimately was achieved with this as a part of it, whether or not it was a catalyst is an entirely different conversation. Some battles are won and lost, but, you know, everything is relative. Those are my thoughts on this pipe operation. I didn't want to cover too much of it because there's actually not much more video other than them walking through these pipes than you might think. This is about it. Let's move on. On or around March 9th, we start to see the beginnings of the Ukrainian withdrawal from the furthest edges of, at the time, the Kursk salient. Here. This is footage of Ukrainians conducting their withdrawal, or at least starting it. Yeah, Rachel, absolutely. I can hook you up with them on Twitter sometime afterwards, bud. I don't say shit for no reason. All right. Let's move on to the next one that I have. Now, in the process of Russia pushing in Kursk, they were setting conditions for that by destroying bridges, like this one. This is a bridge. Presumably this or that being the body of water that it's over top of there. I don't know why I traced my stuff this way, but there's obviously that body of water. But here is the footage of that. Yeah, going back to the Russians thing as well, there's also imagery of them in hospitals, right? So to presume that all of them made it out of there okay would kind of be stupid. To say that it was entirely unsuccessful would also be stupid. I mean, they made it into Sudan through the pipe. They exited out of the pipe. I mean, you guys want to always look for like this two-sided argument to things, and things just aren't that simple. Here's the footage. Now that's going to slow down, or would have at this point, slowed down. You can see him walking over top of it here. Ukrainian withdrawal from that area, everything from vehicles to even foot movement, right? Moving your way in and around and over that rubble is going to take more time than it would if you were just bebopping across it. This is one of the roads, one of the only roads, I think they call it the road of life, leading out of Sudan. This footage is going to show you what the road looks like. Show you the path here. as that road comes all the way down into what's described as this gray area here. Comes all the way down. But it's one of the only roads that was still remaining. Now, it's not, I wouldn't say littered with vehicles and equipment, but it definitely hasn't not been touched.
Жизни забирає свою дань. Раз, два.
Successful is relative. By what definition do you use the word successful? Think about that as destroying that infrastructure slows your own advance and exploitation behind the retrograding forces. So it's an opportunity cost. Well, it didn't. Right, so that ground has presumably at this point been backfilled by Russian forces, understanding that there might not be, I've talked about this relative to the control map before. These control maps that you see here, there isn't a wall of Russian dudes. This is inside Ukraine right now. There isn't a wall of Russian dudes here, right, all holding hands across America style, right? But if they are able to enact control over this, just like with that bridge. So if they destroy that bridge to keep a withdrawal of Ukrainians from happening, but they're still well within drone, artillery, MLRS, indirect ranges, they're still able to control that area, right? So the impact to the withdrawing forces is going to be higher than the impact to the forces on the offensive. Does that make sense? It's kind of a logic argument for me. Now here are the Ukrainian troops as they cross the border checkpoint on the way out. This border checkpoint being here. Got that footage coming up for you now. Wow, look at how strong Ukraine is without 1 week of U.S. intel. Let's chat about that here in a second. I'll give you my thoughts on it. These thoughts are going to be unrelated to footage. These thoughts are going to be coming from an intel guy. The impact that a lack of intel would have had on the Kursk salient is arguable at best or at worst. The impact of a pause in U.S. munitions is arguable at best or at worst. Here's why. On the munitions side, there were continuously munitions that were moving into Ukraine while U.S. munitions were paused. They are not only receiving munitions from the United States. A bulk of them are, certainly. So presumably, they would be directing those to the areas where contact is at its highest. So I would think Toretsk, Picrok, Kursk, most certainly, if Kursk was supposed to be held for something to be used in negotiations later. So munitions would have continued to flow, at least to a certain degree. The actual and true impact of the pause in munitions would probably be felt a little bit later, right? Because by the time they go from Poland, into logistics hubs and they get pushed out, you're looking at, 3 or 4 days. They get put out there. There's going to be stores that they get dropped into. You're going to have 2 or 3 more days until they actually work through the rest of their supplies until they get to that stuff that they had previously received. It is a negligible, in my opinion, this is an opinion, it would be negligible, the impact of those changes on the Kursk salient, one way or the other. There can still be an argument that it had an impact, whether that's because they withheld supplies from going forward because they were concerned about not receiving any in the future. I get it. But to say that one caused the other, I wouldn't say that's the case. That's just coming from my perspective, from an opinion based on the data and reports that I've seen. Let's move on. This is an odd interaction here. I don't know what's going on. Discretion advised. It takes place here, though. Note the location. So this is where that, again, we're pretty close to the former forward line of troops. This is reported to be a contested area. But one dude's going to walk up to another dude. He's going to shoot that guy. He's going to shoot him. The report is that it is a Russian shooting another Russian. Here's the footage. Discretion also advised. It then moves into drone drops, and we get a very clear view of drone drops against troops. Here you are. I'll restart it. Vance's cousin just said that he's witnessed them shoot their troops many times. We've seen that on footage in areas only controlled by Russia. It is something that has happened before. The only thing that raises a question on this is the location relative to the forward line. All right, let's come up. So here is that concern that I mentioned. We're going to head into Ukraine. But to here, we're going to see Russians getting hit on their ATVs by FPV drones. Now, on the one hand, you're going to see what is very much so filmed as Ukrainian perspective footage, right? People would call this is Ukraine footage. Well, I'm going to ask you to think outside the box on this, because what we are seeing is incursions into Ukraine in the same areas where Ukraine had previously had a salient of a very large section of ground into Russia. This is after that salient had, in my opinion, and this is just a word, collapsed. It took place over the course of like 48 hours. That amount of ground falling in 48 hours is a definition of a collapse for me. So in my opinion, what we are seeing here is at least the initial attempts at exploitation of that withdrawal. If Ukraine does not consolidate their defensive positions, the risk associated with a successful Russian exploitation of that withdrawal would end up in Russia holding ground that they can then dangle over Ukraine's head in any would-be negotiations. Now, Putin and the rest of Russia has come out and said no to a ceasefire. Like I said on, again, X, Twitter, I communicate a lot on X and Twitter. If you're not following me there and, you're interested in my expanded thoughts, I do recommend it. Russia's reaction to the opportunity for a ceasefire means a lot more than just, well, they're on the offensive. Why would they accept it? It is truly indicative that Russia is not interested in ending the war in Ukraine. So for those things, Russia has been arguing for peace. Well, a ceasefire is on the table. Whether you believe that Ukraine could use that opportunity to consolidate, or Russia could use that opportunity to consolidate, one way or another, a ceasefire is on the table. Just a ceasefire. That the reason that I say just a ceasefire is that's not even negotiated terms. They are asking for a ceasefire to begin negotiated terms. That's it. So by Russia not accepting that, Russia is not ready to end the war in Ukraine. Now you can like that or you can not. But that itself is its own indicator. Let's take a look at this footage. Coming up for you now. Russia wants to end the war, but there is conditions. You didn't hear anything I just said, because the ceasefire would just be a ceasefire. There would not be conditions associated with the ceasefire. Conditions outside of the exchange of POWs, but that wouldn't even be where the discussion of land cessation or anything happens prior to the ceasefire. That type of stuff would happen after the ceasefire. That was the entire agreement. There's also another piece to this that the United States envoy to Russia has not even presented those terms yet. And when I say terms, again, it is really just a ceasefire. Because in the ceasefire notice itself, it says, hey, we will all come to the table with our negotiators to then work out the terms for the end of the war. So if Russia is not interested in a ceasefire to pause and negotiate terms, that tells me that they are not interested in ending the war. It's actually very simple. They want recognition of the 4 provinces they have took. I understand that, guy. But that would be something to discuss in negotiations during the ceasefire. That's what's being pitched. And Russia turned that down. You see what I'm saying? So it's a bit different than saying, well, Russia isn't accepting the terms for the end of the war. It's like, okay, well, Russia believes that they are in the right and, believe about that what you think. But if Russia isn't accepting the ceasefire to present their terms, because that's what's being offered, is a ceasefire to come to the table, present each other's terms, and disagree at the table so that the ceasefire can go away, because that's what's going to happen. Russia turned down the ceasefire, frankly. Ahead of any cessation of territory conversation, anything. Basically, the United States is trying to mediate the two to come to a table and say, hey, let each other know what you want, and then let's find some middle ground there. Okay? But first, stop shooting at each other. Well, Russia said, no, I want to keep shooting. They do not want an end to the war. So the reason they don't want an end to the war is they're on the front foot right now. They have been for a few months in all except for maybe one area, Toretsk, especially in Kursk. But it's still indicative of them not wanting to end the war. I mean, that's not even opinion. That's just a logical connection of a ceasefire wherein they would present terms, and they said no. They're not taking the opportunity to present their terms in an official capacity. Let's move on. I don't have a geolocation for this one, but this is a Russian Fab 1500 strike somewhere in Kursk, and it is some pretty amazing footage. Here you are. Oh, missed it. This is a Ukrainian Mavic drone that recorded that. That'd be a UMPK. Basically, their precision kind of JDAM ER equivalent, if you will. See the wings that have popped out on it there? Has any country ever accepted a ceasefire other than South Korea? It happens all the time. Ceasefires are accepted all the time in war. right? World War One, there's been ceasefires, some of them locally. In the Civil War, there were ceasefires. What's that story of the Christmas or something in World War One where they all stopped and like played soccer or something, right? There have certainly been, yeah. All right, let's move. I've got a bit of a longer bit of footage here to give you some insight on Russians as they are working through the Kursk salient, taking that back. Here's the footage. It's about 4 minutes long. These are the Kursk Knights. Supposedly, during the operation to take Sudza, their commander and 2 others were killed. No, certainly you don't need a ceasefire to negotiate. Curious. That's not what I'm saying at all.
Леска.
Russian mod release. This is a Russian news release of some kind that I came across.
Бог в помощь.
Вниматели могут быть гражданские.
Там спереди кто? Подвал есть? У нас типа перекур. Ваня.
I think this is supposed to be one of the dudes they lost or something, presumably. All right. Let's come back up. And we're going to pause here. I need to check in on the support. Thank you guys for it. Somebody was just complaining in the chat that I talk too much, so this is a really good opportunity for me to keep doing that. JG Wentworth, thank you for the... God damn it. Thank you for the $5. Don't put Staff Sergeant Adkins in a effing box. He's an intelligence NCO for a reason. Thanks for the $5. Appreciate it very much. Thanks for that. Jordan, thank you for the $5. In all seriousness, I come to see what war's like. I'm surprised by the armchair soldiers who make claims. For some reason, it's not letting me read the rest of that one. Claims or demands. Why won't it let me read the rest of that? That's dumb. What if I make it bigger? Yeah. Not sure what the rest of that says, man. It won't let me read it. I'm not sure why. But thank you very much for the $5. JG Wentworth, thanks for hitting the member button, dude. Appreciate that. Chatter Waters, thanks very much for the $5. Tides a Man Knowing That You've Already Arrived. I'm assuming that's a book or something. I'm not familiar with that one. Ohms, thanks for hitting the member button. Appreciate it. And Ohms, thanks for the 44 months, dude. Jeez. Zzag4 gifted 5 members. So Current Event Nerd, Bebop Cowboy, Steve, John, and Wes. Welcome to the Funkers. Good to have you guys. And Zzag, thanks for gifting them memberships. Jonathan, thanks very much for the $5 here. Good day. Remember, welcome to Costco. I love you. Welcome to Costco. Your birthday cake orders in the back. Have a wonderful day. Thanks, man. Not my birthday, but I appreciate you guys. You guys got a friend of mine, Dave Park, believing that it is my birthday on Twitter yesterday. So thanks for that. Yeah. Really keeping that alive, aren't we? All right. Well, I appreciate it. Drallo, thanks very much for hitting the member button. I'm going to take you guys around the world really quick. Before we move on to the rest of the footage I have for Ukraine, we're going to start with a little bit of footage in the West Bank. We're going to go to a raid in Jenin that comes from the Israeli Border Police. Let me log into the website here because hold on. I can't think and talk. Here's the footage.
הכלב קיבל צרור, תכניס אינדור, תכניס אינדור. זה זריז אליי? מחבל יוצא לכיוון הגג, קטנה מכניסים אינדור, מוודאים חיובי, יש קשר עין, מחבל נפל, יש קשר עין, הוא בגרם מדרגות, יש לו גם M16 עליו.
Dead check. All right. Let's move to the next area, which is technically Syria, but it's still Israel. We have an IDF strike on what was reported to be a PIJ, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, command center. I don't know, building, place. But it took place here. This is technically in Syria. Damascus, I believe. Yeah, that would be Damascus. But here's the strike coming up for you guys now. These last two are up on the website. Not everything that we cover here is going to be on the website. Most of it, I try to make sure is up there, but not all of it. This one is. And it's gone. But speaking of Syria, let's head over and see what our good friend Jelani is doing. This footage is going to be airborne. It's going to take place here. That's approximately where this chopper was. One of the hallmarks of the Assad regime was barrel bombs. Russia has been found to take part in these at times, but so too does Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the Syrian government. Here's the Syrian government. I guess they're not really barrels. Just kind of dumb bombs being kicked out of the back of an Mi-8. Oh, wow. The precision. The absolute precision of this thing as it comes out of there and gets stuck on the side of this and swings underneath of the back of that chopper. Where'd that land? Like, what's the possibility it landed in the water, though? They're not actually over water right now. There's like a little peninsula there that I think they're trying to drop it on, but I'm just saying. Anyway, how about some footage of these guys getting shot at? I'm way into that. Regardless of who's shooting at them, I understand that, you know, there really aren't very many good guys. You know, there's not always a good guy. Guys, there's just simply not, right? There aren't many of them over here, but you know, when one of them is, when they're shooting at each other, I'm kind of okay with that. But how about some footage from here of these guys getting ambushed with heavy machine guns and having to withdraw under fire? I'm into that. Let's take a look at that footage. Coming up for you now. All right, let's bring it up. And we'll go to, once again, more of them getting ambushed, which I'm into watching. Like this one's good. This is a good part of the night. This footage takes place here. So that was in Latakia, by the way. Hold on, let's go back. Just I kind of zoomed through the location for that. But that takes place exactly here. Okay, so those two homeboys were held up behind this wall, firing down this way. You saw that technical backup down this road. And then this next bit of footage is on the route to Jabla. Oop, wrong button. Yep, copy pasta. Here we go. It's going to take us here. So there's going to be a dude, well, at least two guys on top of this, watching this column of like tanks and other guys moseying around beside the tanks. I'm going to assume that these guys are on the side of the tanks and that the tanks are the ones taking contact, but there's a lot of things happening in this. And the assumption, my assumption is the guys on the roof are with the guys meandering down the road, and those two sets of people are Syrian government. That's my assumption. Here is the footage. Meander is the best word I could think of. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. دخلوا الأخوة دخلوا. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. I have no idea. أكبر الله أكبر. دخلوا الأخوة دخلوا. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. All right, let's bring it up. Yeah, so once again, don't know who exactly that was. I would, again, assume that the reason they're not being engaged by the column meandering down the road is that they're a part of that organization of people, right? When it comes to the belligerents across Syria, the good guy, bad guy thing just doesn't really fit, right? There are, of course, the Kurds and certain factions of the Kurds that I would probably hold on a higher tier of the good guy scale. I want to say the Kurds, and I don't have a whole lot of detail on this, but I want to say the Kurds just found some level of alignment with the Syrian government, or Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, however you want to look at that. I haven't really looked into that too far. I don't know exactly how it applies or, you know, what that agreement entails. But you do have U.S. forces in Syria, in the northeastern area. You've got Turks there. You've got Russians. In fact, many of the quote-unquote Christians and Alawites that have been targeted by the Syrian government, Jalani regime, whatever you want to call them, have taken refuge with that small contingent of Russians along the coast. Anyway, it's an absolute soup of people operating in Syria right now. Let's move on. Speaking of good guy, bad guy arguments, what about some Houthis? So if there was one, other than Iran, I'm pretty sure we can all agree that Iran are absolute assholes. But if there was one terrorist organization that wasn't Iran, that I would probably put on the everybody agrees they're assholes level, forgive my language, it'd probably be the Houthis, because even Saudi Arabia is banging on their stuff. Thank you. May I have another? Was that our tax dollars? I don't know, maybe indirectly, because that was a Saudi Arabian. Actually, well, probably not. They've got their own dollars they can throw against that. And any munitions they use that are U.S. munitions were more than likely bought by Saudi Arabia. Love how you dial back the Ukrainian simpin. Now Rus is obviously victorious. You weren't here for the coverage of the counteroffensive, were you, man? Right? Generally speaking, I'm not afraid to tell you that I think it's more in the United States' interest for Ukraine to come out successful, but I'm still going to do this job objectively and show you all the footage, right? Whether you see that or not is really ultimately not my problem. As long as I know that I am working towards that objectivity every day. Because nobody out there, and I don't care who says they are, nobody, it is impossible. There is nobody that is unbiased. Bias is a predisposition, and it's something that comes from a lifetime of upbringing in certain cultures, lifestyles, countries, however you want to look at that. There is no person on the planet that is unbiased, right? The people claiming, hey, you're too unbiased, really only want you to present their bias. Objectivity, that's what you're looking for. If you say that I'm not doing this objectively, that I'm not showing you footage from both perspectives, you're flat wrong. I can take you to any stream, and I can show you footage from any belligerent. I still think it is in America's best interest for Ukraine to be ultimately successful and for us to negotiate more in Ukraine's favor than in Russia's. That's because Russia is an adversary of the United States. They have been since, I don't know, probably their formation after the Soviet Union fell, and I have seen that firsthand. I spent 12 years in the intelligence community dealing with that very specifically, 3 of which was on a counterintelligence team specifically focused on denial and deception to keep their intelligence agencies from targeting you. So yes, that's my bias. When I approach this show, though, I do so as objectively as I can. Let's head back to the footage. We're going to Sudan, where we're going to see that brand new technical smell coming up for you guys right now.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر.
This is the Sudanese army, believe it or not. I'm gonna be honest, they kind of look like the boys and I out on the range. You got a mixture of camo pants and like vet bro t-shirts on with like half completed plate carriers and no plates in them. Like, this is the boys and I. I'm just gonna be honest with you.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر دب اللو دب اللو دب اللو.
I just want to know why I can't have one of those vehicles. You know what I mean? Just missing the beer cans, yeah, and bottles of bourbon, man. Absolutely.
الله أكبر الله دب اللو يا زعتر دب اللو دب اللو. الله أكبر الله أكبر
Yeah, the chicken tax. All right, guys. I know, guys. I know. This Sudanese military. All right, now that they're done screaming, do they want you to take pictures of the Toyota? No. Oh, okay. The flag on the Toyota. Got it. Toyota-thon looks pretty awesome. All right, let's bring it up. We're going to flip the coin over, though. Not really, right? This is another one of those circumstances where you have to ask yourself, you're like, who are the good guys here and who are the bad guys here? Well, I'm going to give you the best example I can to help you understand that that is not always that easy. We're going to see footage here of the RSF on the ground. This is a Sudanese quadcopter that we're watching this through. The RSF on the ground took hostages. Bad guys, right? Well, the hostage escapes, but they only escape because the Sudanese military did a drone drop on the group of people that had hostages. Here you are. These are the Rapid Support Forces. What's that guy's name? General Hamedi? Right? I don't know. Oh, I think they were saying hostage. But it said hotel. Yeah, we'll just drop grenades on them, even though they have hostages. God, that's really far. Can't have hostages if they're dead. All right, now you tell me. Which one? Which one? Because I can't even tell you which one the United States prefers. I can't tell you which one Russia prefers. Well, sort of. It used to be the RSF. So this is an interesting one I haven't talked about in a little while. Russia used to support the RSF primarily with Wagner. So Wagner was in Sudan teaching the RSF how to fight. And that's why Ukraine sent special forces guys to Sudan to shoot Wagner. Well, then Russia started overtly supporting the Sudanese military while Wagner was still supporting the RSF because Russia's been trying to establish a port. Like Port Sudan, like there's a whole nightmare of, it's not quite as bad as Syria with the factions and such. Actually, Syria's kind of cleaning up when it comes to who's siding with who. Once upon a time, during the Syrian civil war, it was extremely difficult to understand. But this one is like very confusing, right? I need to spend a little bit more time on it, though. Let's head back to Ukraine. We're done with our Around the World section here, and we're going to be jumping over to Donetsk, starting with Chasiv Yar. Another area of heavy operational activity from Russia. Here. So you note these purple areas. These are Russian gains just in 2025. This footage is going to take place here. It's going to be a Ukrainian rotation of troops. I'm going to try and tie a story together, though. This took place on or around. I say on or around because I know what day this was published. I don't necessarily know what day this took place. But on or around the 8th of March. Yes, DS. Stream lagging? If it is, it's you. It's not me. I'm not dropping any packets or frames. Who's too busy whining about his favorites, the Israelis? I think I covered like one video of theirs. And I've talked about the Syrian Christians like 3 or 4 times tonight. What are you talking about? Did you just get here? Did you just wake up or something? I don't know. Go if you're sleepy, go have some coffee, maybe. I don't know. I'm just not in the habit of showing footage of innocent people being executed on the streets. We all know Ronnie's only pro-Greenland. We need to leave the Greenland bullshit alone. Excuse my language again. Like, there are actual issues that we should be worrying about, not whether or not we have Greenland. So dumb. Why are you only showing Ukrainian casualties? That's an interesting one. That might be a first. Yeah, the obsession with Greenland. Now, from a certain perspective, I can understand wanting, words are hard, an increased military presence in Greenland. It is, pretty critical area. There's a reason that all the way back to World War II, Hitler wanted a presence in Greenland. There's a lot of value to that land. But even still, there are ways to accomplish that don't involve annexing Greenland. I mean, it's fun to joke about, but, let's be serious. This is ridiculous. Let's move on to the next one. What's interesting about this strike is I'm going to show you where that strike took place, and then a couple days later, this is what happened. So that last video was a troop rotation that took place here for Ukrainians. A couple days later, a drone strike right there. This took place on or around the 13th. So on or around the 13th, that position still occupied by Ukrainians. Why not show Syria? We already covered Syria. We watched like 3 or 4 videos from Syria. All right. I have a Russian airstrike here. Takes place here. Videos coming up now. All right. There is an airstrike. Here it is. Ronnie, you need Snickers or something? Nope. I'm good. I ate before I started. All right. Now we're going to move into Toretsk, where I have a bit of close combat here. I'm going to tie one of these stories together for you once again. Toretsk is one of those areas that I mentioned that Ukraine has been very active while Kursk has been falling. Ukraine has been actively taking ground back in Toretsk. This city was previously fully held by Russia, but Ukraine has gained quite a bit of ground back. This takes place here. Now, what you're going to see are Russians. These Russians are going to hit a occupied or barricaded position of Ukrainians with an RPG, a shoulder, one of the newer ones though, not an RPG-7, or the new ones, the 28 maybe. So they're going to hit it with that. But then one of these dudes is going to scurry up there and he's going to toss an anti-tank mine in there that's been turned into some form of like a satchel charge. And they'll run off and it's just going to detonate. Here's the footage. And you're going to ask me, how the hell do you know it was an RPG-28, not a normal one? I got the answer for you. Just stand by. Greenland. Hey, Benjamin, I got a quick question here. Is that directed at me? Greenland is in North America, you effing dolt. The USA is a large country. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. Idiotic take, sir. Is that directed at me? Because I got a super interesting conversation to have with you here in a minute. Trolls 1? No, I just like talking to you. I'm here for this is not a true show. This is for us to show you the footage and to engage with the Funker 530 community. If this was a show a la Crowder or any of these other guys, I would not be sitting here just talking to you, and I would have a script, and I would have a producer, and I would have somebody that will pull up overlays. That's not what this is designed for. This is designed to interact with the community at Funker 530. Where'd he go? Did he answer? All right. Anyway, he didn't answer yet. So, Ronnie, how do you know that it was an RPG-28? Well, I'm going to show you helmet camera footage of the Russian perspective of that. And it's kind of crazy. I didn't know that this was the same incident, but I happened to be poking around looking for footage to talk to you guys about tonight, and saw this one and was like, wow, that's the same TTP tactic that I already had marked. Here it is, the ground perspective of that.
Все, плюс. Как приходили по тому же маршруту, блядь.
Давай, братан, огонь!
What the hell is a 28? If I have my nomenclature correct, that's what he just fired there. Is an RPG-28 rather than like an RPG-7, which is the one that most people know. If I have my nomenclature correct, I might not. You know, I'm not the best when it comes to individual armament. But when most people think of an RPG, they think of the classic, I don't know, RPG. RPG-28 actually looks a lot more like what you would expect to see from an AT-4 or a Law, one of those types. So I believe that's an RPG-28. I can't be certain. I'm sure somebody will correct me, but that's what a 28 is. 26? Is it 26? All right, so here goes this guy. He's going to scurry on up there. Note this outhouse right here. This outhouse, right there. $26. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Woof.
Прямо!
Ronnie, you have the ability to admit when you're wrong about something does you credit. Your ability to admit when you're wrong about something does you credit. I do not mind being wrong. I don't care. Because we treat our Twitter the same way. I'm going to rant about something here. So there's a habit of these very large Twitter accounts. They'll post something that is just wildly incorrect. And then a bunch of people will call them out like, I can't believe you. This is so dumb. And then they'll delete it because it's gone forever at that point. The fact that they were ever wrong is gone, right? They have a squeaky clean record from there forward because, to be honest with you, the total retention life cycle on Twitter is about 27 minutes. Our policy, which is a policy that I set, is if we ever call something and just totally wrong, we miss it. We're not changing it. We're not deleting it. We're going to post a follow-up to that says, hey, we effed up. This is actually Jim, not Bob. The reason that I want to do that is it's important for people to see that there are people behind Funker 530, right? It's not going to make us popular. It's not going to make us the default for people to go to. Like, they always make the call correctly because nobody does. And in fact, most of these very large kind of influencer types, they're more degenerate than you might think. I'll just put it that way. Like, some of these people, these are not your champions, and I'll just put it that way. We don't want to be either. We just want to ensure that we're showing you that we're doing our best with the information that we have at any given time. If that information turns out to be wrong, then it's wrong, frankly. And that's kind of a policy we have across the entirety of Funker 530. It's a transparency thing. It's not about being right so that people will follow us and believe that we're right. It's hopefully that people will understand that if I'm telling you that it's Jim, then you know that I believe that it's Jim. It's as easy as that. Let's move on. I have, I just labeled this machine gun. I think I know why. Yeah, this is a Brazilian volunteer in Toretsk somewhere, and this is a machine gun. I guess that's the guy. Right there. Anybody else interested to hear that again? To whom it may concern. That's what he just said. All right. Where are we going next? We are going into Pokrovsk, where we have, once again, close combat. And it starts with Russians assaulting a house. It doesn't end that way. So these Russians are assaulting this house. Okay? Well, then they ultimately have to surrender. It happens. Here is the footage.
В цьому відео показуємо.
I know. Actually, we can listen to that.
Та взяли полонених. Двоє штурмовиків знаходяться в цій споруді. Біля неї з'являється двоє, а потім іще двоє. Наші хлопці ось тут. Відстань мінімальна. Кулеметник перший висовується, дає чергу, потім туди летить граната. Значить, тут не виходить. Обходять з іншого боку. Ось один зближується і стріляє в двері. Наші відповідають. Знову не вийшло. Тут у наших хлопців з'являється підтримка з повітря. По групі окупантів починають працювати FPV. І на цьому весь штурм закінчується. 300-ті поглушені, розповзаються в різні боки. Кулеметник втік, двоє ховаються в підвалі поряд. І ще один забрів кудись подалі. Його одразу наздоганяє FPV. Влучання 1, 2 і 3. Після третього там вже нічого не рухалося. Після цього наші хлопці отримують команду, що можна працювати. Вони виходять, перевіряють погріб з 2 підами всередині і з'ясовують, що піди вже не хочуть воювати. Хлопці беруть 2 полонених.
All right. So I don't speak Ukrainian. I'm assuming that was Ukrainian, but essentially he was just describing that although they were initially assaulting the house, FPV drones kind of came in and worked on them a little bit until essentially the Ukrainians came out of the house. What's that, the term for sally, like a sally port. They sallied out of the house and got themselves some Russian prisoners of war. So we're headed to Udachny? I don't know. Here is where this takes place. Still, generally speaking, along this Pokrovsk front. We talked last stream about this little town here and how critical that would be for Ukraine's defense of this supply route into and out of Pokrovsk. And also, you know, from a just general access to a lot out here. But we're going to see 2 Ukrainian Humvees come screaming into this location here with 50s blazing on the top of their vehicles, banging at this building while dismounts get into those Humvees and unass that location. That's the video we're about to watch now. It's coming up for you now. Oh. What even was that? I want to know. No. Nope. It was Lady Gaga. I teach a wet yoga class to them. What's a wet yoga class? What is that? All right. Let's bring it up. Shake it, Ronnie. Shake it. I ain't shaking nothing. All right. So, Dobropilia. The video that you're going to watch here is, by definition, a war crime. It's going to take place here. You're going to see emergency personnel responding to a strike that took place on this location, where it was then followed by a second strike using cluster munitions. This would be a population center. Okay? It would be impossible by the definition of, you know, but just by the definition, it would be impossible for Russia to work to mitigate civilian casualties by firing on that location using cluster munitions. Not possible whatsoever. This would be the targeting of civilian spaces, as well as the targeting of emergency personnel. Here's the footage. Again, this is what they would call a double tap strike, where a strike took place, people were filming because of that strike, and this followed.
Сука, блядь! Ёбаный в рот, блядь! Пизда нахуй! На землю ложись, блядь! Под стену ложитесь все! Под стену ложитесь! Пиздец, блядь. Пизда нахуй. Под
One
На
more.
землю ложитесь, блядь! На землю нахуй! Блядь, нахуй, сука, блядь! Ёбаный в рот, блядь! Пизда нахуй! На землю ложись, блядь! Под стену ложитесь все! Под стену ложитесь! Пиздец, блядь! Пизда нахуй!
All right. Let's come back up. Now, what we will be watching next are, so I see it in the chat, Cope Stream. If you're watching somebody that can't call a spade, you need to stop. Because the next footage that you're going to watch are Ukrainian drone strikes on high-rise buildings inside of Moscow. By definition, these also would meet war crime. Here comes the footage. This is where this takes place. I've got multiple of these. I've got impacts all throughout Moscow here. There would be no way for Ukraine to differentiate what was a civilian target and what wasn't inside of a city like this. The population density is simply too high. So you have to be targeting military infrastructure, military equipment. Even if you are targeting military equipment that is housed alongside civilians, you have to be able to articulate that you are actively working to limit civilian casualties. It's one of those things that militaries across the world, especially in the East, do very often, is they'll park that shit right underneath of a blown out shopping mall, right? And then they'll open the shopping mall up. By definition, in my opinion, I'm not a Hague lawyer, that's what this would be. Here comes the footage. This is going to be a drone flying over the city. Just to show you, this is the geolocation of that drone as it's flying over the city. And then we're going to go to Russian SHORAD, short-range air defense, engaging from here. That's a Pantsir system that is installed there. And that footage is coming up for you now. So we'll see that engaging other drones over the city.
Блять. Ебашит нахуй ПВО, блять. О.
All right. Now, I don't know why I labeled this drone impact, sort of. And there's an additional piece of nuance to this that I want to talk about as well. So we're going to move into the city proper to here. This high rise. I remember why. This is a CCTV camera that catches the impact while looking at the street, and you'll see debris that falls down. Yep, that's what I thought. All right, let's move to the next one. So that little bit of extra nuance that I talked about is there's some level of likelihood that since these are primarily just GPS guided, that in some way they were jammed when they got over the city, when in fact they might have been targeting something else. They kind of just veered off and hit whatever they hit. Here's the problem with that. My issue with that is that still, if you know that you're going to encounter those things and there is an overwhelming likelihood of civilian casualties, you have to take that into account. I get and understand and recognize 100% top to bottom, the defensive nature of Ukraine's strikes into Russia. However, this is just into Moscow, right? If you know that you're going to be jammed, that your drones are going to end up going awry in some other direction, find a different capability to hit that military target if you did have a military target. This strike takes place here. A massive drone strike into Moscow. It's like a neighborhood. And then I've got one more impact for you here. Taking us back into the city to this apartment complex. It's going to be here. So I'll say it again. You can be supportive of Ukraine, whilst also at the same time understanding that striking civilian targets in Moscow is not the way. Russia has been striking civilian targets in Ukraine for quite a long time, but my grandma told me that two wrongs don't make a right. I don't have to self-justify everything that Ukraine does. And if I supported Russia, I don't support either of them. I'm American. I think that Ukraine's success does more things for America than Russia's success. But if I did support Russia, I don't have to justify everything that Russia does in pursuit of their war. If you're unable to see that strikes like this, and again, if they are being stopped by electronic warfare assets, then that's something, there's a strong likelihood that some civilians just going to catch a drone to the face because of that. These are not small explosives on these drones. These are not precision weapons. These are things that absolutely can and will and do cause casualties to civilians when they fly over a city like Moscow. I saw a comment in the chat that was a super interesting one. Well, they don't have any other capabilities to hit Moscow. Well, I guess you're not hitting Moscow. If your only option is to use a capability that's very likely going to get jammed and end up going through some innocent person's living room, whether you like Russians or not, they're not the ones fighting the war. Don't do it. It's as simple as that, right? Let's move on. I've never associated more with a video in my life. Performance issues. The drone had one too many whiskeys. All right, let's bring it up. That's rich coming from America since you guys I can carpet bomb anybody, bro. I mean, you guys. Did that civilian in that high rise carpet bomb anybody? I don't know. Did the civilian that Russians dropped from a Mavic drone, a grenade down in their lap in Kherson, did they carpet bomb anybody? No. War is such. It's an unfortunate reality. Civilians will be targeted during war. It's one of those realities that makes war truly bad, is it will happen. There's never been a war in history where civilians weren't impacted by it. Casualties, civilian casualties, not just impacts, because there are economic impacts that come along with war as well. But in the pursuit of waging war, doing so with the specific purpose of mitigating civilian casualties, that's what the world looks for when it comes to support. And if you are currently supporting a belligerent in war that willy-nilly just does things that definitely do impact civilians, understanding that their civilians themselves have been impacted, an eye for an eye leaves everybody blind. Another grandma thing. Like this is not complicated stuff, right? Let's move. The drones are having babies now. So that boat drone just gave birth to little baby quadcopters. Russia also targeted civilian apartments, to be fair. It doesn't make it right. We called out those, literally the video before this one. So I said the same thing when we were covering that footage, right? All right, let's bring it up. So when that first footage started hitting the world of Russians executing POWs, they're like, well, two wrongs don't make a right. We're not talking about that. We're talking about this one. If we're not focused very intently on these individual events, right? You have to look at that event. You can understand the context that surrounds it. That's important. It provides value to understand causation. But again, if you walk out on the street and shoot somebody in the face, you shot that person in the face regardless of what happened to you prior. Footage. This is a Ukrainian assault on Russian positions. All right, let's bring it up. Saw an interesting one. Something. Your Army intelligence, Ronnie, and you're trying to tell me this isn't your job. I didn't tell you any of this wasn't my job. Not even in the slightest. What did I tell you wasn't my job? Let's move to this one. These are going to be Ukrainians riding on the top of, I think it's a BTR. BMP, maybe. Yeah, it looks like a BMP. Riding on the top of a BMP where they get hit with both an FPV drone and a drone-dropped munition in succession. Discretion advised. All right. He's not very good at trying to be impartial. Nobody said I was impartial. So why is it necessary to be impartial? Right? If you're impartial, it separates you entirely from the humanity of the conflict, of the war, right? You can be objective, certainly. Yeah, absolutely. But being impartial is kind of like saying that somebody's unbiased. And that's not possible, right? True impartiality means that when you see a POW being killed, you just think, I'm certainly not impartial. I don't care whose POW it is. I don't want to see that happening. Right? I still wear the uniform. Hopefully I don't run into a circumstance where I'm captured and end up as a POW, but I would hope that with Geneva registration that I am treated per Geneva protocols. I would hope. Just like Putin's statements that he just made, that quote unquote foreign mercenaries will not be treated per Geneva because Geneva doesn't apply to them. He's right that Geneva doesn't apply to them, but the circumstances that he's talking about when it comes to those quote unquote foreign mercenaries have, at least the majority of them, contracts with the Ukrainian military. They are recognized as Geneva combatants. But impartiality, this expectation that everybody is just this impartial blank slate is impossible. Now, even with partiality, I don't even know if that's a word, you could still be objective. Objectivity is what you want. That's what people need to strive for, is being able to say, hey, that's a dude, right? If that's a dude, great, that's a dude. There are people out there that'll say, it's kind of a guy, but we don't know, he's got some long hair, could identify as something. That's a dude. If you know that's a dude, call it out. It's my way of saying a spade is a spade. That's the most common terminology. Being objective in the review of information. If it's Ukraine and Russia, if Ukraine is losing in a video, present that Ukraine is losing in a video. If it's Russia losing in a video, present that Russia is losing in this video. People believe that they want impartiality. What they need to strive and ask people for is objectivity. Those are two very, very different things. One is possible, the other is simply not. It is not possible to be impartial. It's not. That's it that I have for you guys. I need to check in on the support over here, and thank you very much. All of that's opinion. Your mileage may vary, and you're entitled to however you want to take all of it. You're entitled to internalize it however you like. You can attack me for it. One day I could be a Ukraine simp. The next day I could be, sucking on Putin's hangdown. One day I could be a Jew. The next day I could, I don't know. I could be a statist. I didn't even know what that was. Feel free. I'm not afraid to share an opinion, especially if it's one that I believe in. There are a lot of people that pander to a base. We don't have a base at Funker 530. I'm not here to pander to anybody. I'm here to give you my opinion on things, to show you the footage. If you don't want, I am starting to sprinkle more opinion on it. And if you don't want that, that's fine. Don't watch. It's great. No, you don't have to, because I am not Funker 530. Go watch it on the website. Go check the website, right? It's there for you. And it's just the footage. You don't even have to read the articles, man. Anyway, let me check in on the support, because you guys are super generous, and I appreciate that very much. Ronnie is the most impartial influencer. I hate that word. Thanks for the $5, John. $2 from Robert. Thank you very much for that. John Maxwell, again, for another $5. Ronnie commented on 40K lore. This is technically a war crime. I mean, come on, man. Archeesy, thanks for the $100 super chat. What's up, dude? Not much, man. Just another combat footage show. It's good to see you, and thank you for that. That's a lot of dollars, my man. I wish I was more eloquent. I wish I could wax poetic all over you right now, but I can't. So thank you for the $100. John, thank you for the $5 before that. Ronnie's ability to admit mistakes, I appreciate that. It takes his journalism apart. I'm not a journalist, and he knows that. He's picking at me right now. But thanks for the $5, John. 693 from Consecrator. Thanks for the level head, Ronnie. YouTube shows, which you aren't, often jump to whatever is the popular. Yeah, I think so. There's been footage from months ago that we've covered on this show solely because I think it's fantastic footage that provides a really good lens into war. We watched, here's a good example. There was a 3-minute, 40-second clip of those Russians moving through Kursk, right? super high definition, gave us an understanding of their kit. Not so much on TTPs and stuff, but I thought that provided really valuable context. That's the frame that I use to pick footage for the show, for the review, for whatever this is. That's why I call it a recap or a review. We're really just looking at stuff that I have found across the information space that I think provides a lens into war. And that's what we do at the greater mission. So that's why I think it fits really well. We're working on some additional shows where we'll dive more into the geopolitics around things a little bit more. I'll bring in some experts for that. We'll also tie in a little bit of firearms work with it because I think those things run in parallel. I'm going to say something that'll probably piss most of you guys off. Both October 7th and the Ukraine war are some of the best justifications for the Second Amendment that I've ever seen in my life. There were Ukrainians lined up for blocks waiting to get a single rifle. A bunch of Palestinians, in paragliders with flip-flops took over entire kibbutz and needed very heroic actions from handgun-wielding security guards. These are the best arguments for an armed populace that I've ever seen, to be honest with you. No, the Second Amendment or an armed populace would not have kept Russia from invading, but Ukrainians wouldn't have been standing in a line for blocks waiting on a single rifle with a single magazine worth of ammo. They would have already had it. So all those saboteur videos of Russians riding through Kyiv in the first days of the war, they'd have been bopping them from the windows, man. Anyway, soapbox. Mariah, thank you very much for the $4.99. JD63, thank you for the $50, dude. Oh, man, thank you for that. Who am I missing here? Tyler, thank you for the $2.58. Please give us spot on Showtime's dates. So let's explain the shift to Thursdays. Last week we moved to Thursday because I thought I had to travel Friday. This week I moved to Thursday because I do have to travel Friday. I had my schedule backwards. I normally talk about the schedules on the Tuesday night streams over on my other channel. I will do my best to start trying to put those out on Twitter. Maybe I'll also put them on the Funker Twitter. I try to keep that footage focused, but I'll try and be better about it, man. I appreciate it. And Jonathan Smith, I did get that second $5 super chat. The rest of that comment: armchair soldiers ready to fight and die with other people's blood, etc. There's no harm in just generally being supportive of somebody else, but when that somebody else is ready to stop fighting, don't be making decisions for them. Zelensky seems to be ready to come to the table to end the war right now. He obviously has his reasons and things that he wants in the process of doing that, and people need to respect that he is ready to end the war, right? That's apparent. If he is ready for a ceasefire, if he is actively working to even just sign a mineral deal that will provide some level of cessation to the fighting. Seems like one side is more ready to close the deal on ending the war than the other to me. It's up to you on what you believe otherwise. Consecrated, thanks for the $6.93. I appreciate you guys. I always have one more video to show you. This one's, well, it might... I don't know. You might laugh. I laughed when I watched it. That's because I'm not a good person, and I don't pretend to be. But I don't know if this is a Ukrainian or a Russian. I have no idea. But I do know that they probably didn't grow up on a dirt bike. I'm out of here. I'm going to go over and play a little bit of games, and I'm going to drink some bourbon and relax a little bit. You're welcome to join me. Leave your bullshit over here, though, if you want to. Because we're relaxing over there. I'll pick a fight. We can box in the chat all you want over here, but over there we support veteran charity. So if you'd like to be involved in that, please come on by. Anyway, good night. Go be great and stay informed. Damn. Good night.